I'm going to respond to this week's discussion about taxing the fat cats with a video response, which I'm going to post on my YouTube. So the topic in question for discussion is, do you think that the banks should be taxed to help recover losses that occurred in the economy in 2008 and 2009? And I personally feel that our government should be taxing these said fat cat big banks in an effort to help recover the losses. So the tax that they're thinking about implementing is a 0.15% charge against coverage liability. It would implement the banks with the highest amount of leverage. So basically 60% of the revenue that's collected from this tax would come from the 10 largest financial institutions in the country. Basically, these are the banks with more than $50 billion worth of taxable assets. So I think that they should tax the banks because the banks are part of the reason why the economy is so bad. They helped to create this by their bad management, the ways they manage bad. Therefore, they should help end the financial crisis if that's even possible. So how they created this is because they set loose standards in regard to lending. And then they increased their penalty fees to make up for all the free products they offered. I found these by looking at, I've read a discussion about Bank of America, and their CEO was literally talking about the problems. And so basically all of their loose standards and lending and everything, that had a negative impact on the citizens of the country, because it severely limited the customer's opportunity to take out loans and get the money they needed, which that's not really fair. It's the bank's fault. They didn't run their business correctly, and banks are businesses, so they need the proper management. So my first point is that it says a lot about the previous failures when I read about Mr. Moynihan, who is the CEO of Bank of America, as I just said. He admits the need to enact stricter requirements on capital and liquidity. In his words, the former means a business will be conducted, quote unquote, never again. And I think that's a pretty strong statement. It shows how much it really impacted the banking industry in our country overall, that the CEO is going to literally put down the way that they were banking before. And my second point is, the banks have already repaid the money they received as part of the TARP, Troubled Assets Relief Program. Goldman Sachs, one of the biggest banks or whatever, returned $10 billion worth of loans, and JP Chase returned $25 billion, and the loans were repaid. Goldman actually paid an extra $1.1 billion to redeem for warrants that it issued to the government, and JP Chase, the Treasury Department, generated $90 million by auctioning warrants that it received from the JP Chase business. But all of these financial institutions were able to repay their loans based on the atmosphere that the environment created for them, the financial atmosphere. Okay, the government implemented the TARP, which gave them money to pay off the loans. They did the AIG bailout. In the Federal Reserve policy, they reduced it to the interest rate to 0% so that these banks wouldn't even have to pay extra. And they also induced various lending projects. So in opposition to my argument, I feel that the banks will argue that if they're taxed more, then they won't be able to lend as much, and then obviously their revenues will go down. But in reality, they aren't lending that much because of the economy right now. And as it is, they really shouldn't be lending anyway, because the markets just aren't there, and it's not, they shouldn't, yeah, okay. So they were implying that it would deplete their financial ability so much that it would cut into their business. But here is a complete fallacy to that statement. If JP Chase and Goldman Sachs both set aside pools of extremely large amounts of money to give as 2009 bonuses and other compensations to their workers and their CEOs, I feel like this is the same exact thing they just did in 2008 or whenever that was, when all the CEOs were going on expense-paid trips to spas. They're getting all these compensations for things that didn't even make sense just because they're CEOs, and they have the right to do that because it's a capitalist country. But this is why we should tax the banks, because they give out absurd bonuses and stuff like this to their CEOs and workers, not workers, but CEOs, and that's just not right. So, therefore, they really can afford this tax. So I completely support this tax proposition, and I think the government should implement Obama's quote-unquote financial crisis responsibility fee, because that's what it really is. They created this environment. They They created this the way the country is financially right now, and I don't think that's right. It would tax the banks more, and it would generate $50 billion in taxable assets. It would cost the financial industry about $90 billion over 10 years, which when you cut it down, a 0.15% tax is something they really can't afford. What's really ironic about this is the institutions that will be taxed will be literally paid to be a big bank or insurance company, but by them paying this tax, I mean, they're going to literally be helping create insurance for the financial industries of America, which I think is ironic because they're banks and insurance industries. So I think that the government should impose this tax, and that's my opinion. Thank you.